but let's bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we again thank you for this evening, Lord, for bringing Daniel here, Lord, to give us wisdom and direction, just knowledge of his experiences, understanding of the Israel people, and just to help us understand the Word of God better. So I pray, Lord, to go before him, just speak through him, Lord. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. So I don't know if you guys know Daniel Calic. See? Told you. I was practicing that like 10 times, and someone just told me that before I came up here. Calic. He was born in California, went to Stanford University. You moved to Israel, you became a citizen in Israel in 2011? Lived there till last year, right? Came back for family issues, sickness. So now he's here in Las Cruces at our disposal. So if we don't get enough questions answered, he has more information to share with us. So he's a Messianic believer, so it gives you a special insight, understanding. There's very few that we've met here. I think we know of one other. But I think his insight into the Jewish culture, and it's going to be open to Q&A. He's going to present some information, but then open it up to questions you may be been wanting to ask. So from a Jewish perspective, I think it's going to be very beneficial. So with that, if you want to welcome Daniel Calic up here. I practiced too much. That's what happened.
Oh, well, thank you, Pastor. The only correction I have in what Pastor Dwayne just said is I was born at Stanford University. I didn't graduate from Stanford University, although I'm a great fan of the Stanford football team. Okay, so, but that's okay. I mean, you know, mistakes is part of life. So, but that's probably because I didn't give you the right information to give him. Okay, all right. Well, tonight I hope will be interesting for you, because I don't know how much exposure or experience any of you have had with Jewish people, Messianic Jewish believers, because that takes it into yet another category. And what I hope to be able to do is dispel some stereotypes that have long existed, such as all Jews are rich. I'm not. There's a lot of things in terms of the kingdom perspective that unfortunately have been perpetrated for far too long. And we're going to talk about some of that tonight, and I will try to give you my insight. And if you have contrary opinions, you're more than welcome to share them. This is not a you're right, I'm wrong, I'm right, you're wrong kind of scenario. Because if I can pop this open a little bit here and hit it once more. Let's see. No, it doesn't want to close, but let's try. There we go. A true believer should be hungry. And why do I say hungry? Because if we get to a point in our kingdom walk that we think we've learned everything there is to know, I don't care how many churches you've been to, how many great sermons you've listened to, and I know that Pastor Dwayne is very accomplished, but if you get to a point where you think you know it all, that's called pride. And you don't want to have that characteristic as a believer. Okay? So we should always be hungry. And this is something that happened to me after I became a believer. After I became a believer. Because once I became a believer, I thought, well, gosh, I know everything. I'm Jewish. I now believe in Jesus, so I know everything. I got the best of both worlds, you know? I can talk to Christians and tell them, hey, you need to know this because you don't really have the whole story. And I can talk to my Jewish brothers and sisters and say, you don't know the whole story. But that's really not the best way to present these kinds of things. The best way when you're talking about someone's core belief is done in relationship, discipleship, okay? And I can't tell you how many times I've engaged with people online in Facebook groups or whatever it might be, and somebody puts something up, and pretty soon you've got this, the computer is so hot it's turned red, because all people are doing is spewing what they've already been taught rather than listening to what somebody else might share with them. So if you want the same respect from somebody that's attempting to share something, give it to them too. You may not agree, but be kind. But by all means, be hungry. Be teachable. And believe you me, coming from a Jewish family, a totally Jewish background, my family, my mother and father, blessed memory, have both passed on, but they were founding members of what became one of the largest Jewish congregations on the San Francisco Peninsula, about 5 miles from Stanford University. And my late father had a position of honor in the congregation. Have you ever heard the term Baltakia? Probably not. But let me show you something which you might be familiar with. Does anyone know what this is?
Yes.
You ever heard the term shofar?
Yes.
Okay. It's also known as a ram's horn.
Right.
In Judaism, this is a holy instrument. This shofar was passed down from my late grandfather, who was also a Baltakia, which is the person that has the honor of sounding the shofar. And that takes place only 2 times a year. Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. Some people think Rosh Hashanah is synonymous with creation. And Yom Kippur, which comes 10 days later, which is known as the Day of Atonement. And the final event that takes place, and these 2 holidays are called the High Holy Days. They are the 2 most holy days in Judaism. And when you're in Israel, wow. If you are driving a car on Yom Kippur anywhere in Israel and you are close to a religious Jewish community, you might get rocks thrown at your car. That's how serious they are about not doing things that are outside of Torah, which of course a lot of people think means law. It actually does not mean law. Torah means teachings and instructions, and we'll talk a little bit about that, especially when we get into the misnomer that Jesus did away with the law. This is, former President Trump would call it fake news, okay? I'll just say for the time being it's inaccurate, and I even have text to prove that. But getting back to being teachable, if somebody's attempting to speak to you about your interpretation of Scripture, to me, I find that one of the most important topics to pay close attention to. Because at the end of our lives, okay, and this is a little bit more from a Jewish perspective than a Christian perspective, but at the end of our lives, we're all going to be judged, okay? And while you may not think or consider Judaism as a messianic religion, let me tell you that it is, for a couple of different reasons. Have any of you been to Israel? Okay, okay. Have you been to the Mount of Olives? There's a huge cemetery on the Mount of Olives. Why is a Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives? Does anybody know? Go ahead. Just anybody? Okay. No answers. That's fine. Hopefully there'll be some more questions that there will be answers to. But the reason that there's a cemetery there is because Judaism, in actuality, is the largest messianic religion in the world. Christianity's already got it. Jesus has come, and there's 1 point how many billion Christians. They got it. The question is, how does Christianity look at Jesus? Does it look at Jesus as the man who did away with the law? Or do they look at Jesus, Yeshua, as the man who came and fulfilled Isaiah 53? Okay? The reason I say Judaism is a huge messianic religion is because they are still waiting for a Messiah. To the Jewish people, however incorrect you might perceive it to be, the Jewish people are waiting for a Messiah to come, not as a servant, as Yeshua came on Palm Sunday and everybody was saying, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. And he was beaten and whipped and tortured and put on a stick and hung. The Jewish Messiah is a conquering king. So therefore, this man who is Jewish, we all know Jesus, Yeshua was Jewish, okay? But they are waiting for a conquering king to come. So this is one of the reasons, one of the major reasons why Jews have, for the most part, not accepted Jesus, Yeshua, as Messiah. They're waiting for a different guy. But they didn't get the memo that the rest of us got, okay? They didn't get that memo. If they did, they put it in a chest of drawers and it's still sitting there with a lot of dust on it. So when I say teachable, again, not to belabor, but I think that it's extremely important and valuable that we lend a respectful ear when somebody wants to talk to us. Because if we ever get to a point where we say, oh yeah, I've learned it, I read the Bible. Not once, not twice, I read it 3 times. I know exactly what John 5:46 says. I know exactly what Romans 11 says. I know exactly what Jeremiah 31 says. I know it all. The moment you say that, you've made a mistake. You made a mistake. Why have you made a mistake? 1, it's a prideful statement. And 2, you've set yourself up to be an authority and you're going to be attacked. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Once more. Okay. Humble. That's the third characteristic which I believe is extremely important. Because if you're not, then you're not approachable. And if you're not approachable, how on earth are you going to talk to somebody about who God is, who Messiah is? These are the most important topics that a human being, if they're serious about these issues, these are the most important topics that people are going to, they're not going to talk about, did you get that new, 240Z? Did you get a hole-in-one on par 14 the other day? These are not the most important topics. So I show you these things, and to finish my thought about this, there are a number of wonderful Christian Zionists. Has anybody heard the term Christian Zionist?
Yes.
Okay, do you know what a Christian Zionist is? No? There's a difference between Christian Zionists and Messianics. I'm a Messianic. I'm a Jew who didn't stop being a Jew when I accepted this Jewish guy named Yeshua as my Messiah. Now, Most of you in this room, I assume, are Christian. Not all, but most of you in this room, I assume, are Christian. Did you stop being a Christian when you accepted Jesus? I'm guessing not. Why would you? You've been taught. This is the man who came to fulfill it all. This is the Son of God. Many people would say an integral part of the Trinity, but we're not going to get into that. I don't want to go into Protestantism, Catholicism, and all that other kind of stuff tonight. I want to talk to you about Israel and Jewish things and what have you, and Messianic things. But a Jewish person, hear me when I say this, please, because I mean it sincerely. A Jewish person doesn't stop being a Jew when they accept Jesus Messiah. Why would they? A lot of people will say, well, you believe in Jesus, you're a Christian. True. But I'm also a Jew. And I'm talking about me now. I'm not talking about y'all. You may have some Jewish friends. But I will tell you this, when I accepted, and this was a whole deal in and of itself, it didn't exactly go over well in my family. Okay? Because the stereotypical viewpoint of Jesus, Yeshua, is Jesus is the Messiah of the enemies of the Jews. So you accept their Messiah, get out of my house. And believe me when I tell you, this has happened a lot in Jewish families. Some more religious Jewish families, the father has been known to tear his clothing as a symbol of mourning. That son or daughter of his is dead to them. Now I know you're probably thinking, wow, how can anybody in their right mind think that way about someone who's the Prince of Peace? Well, I hesitated a little bit, but I'm going to, because we're all friends, right? You're all buying me lunch tomorrow, right? Okay, sure. Okay. So I want to put this down, and I want to bring up another, if maybe I can get a little bit of help here, if I'm technically not. Let me do this. I want to bring up another, let's see. Yeah, I'm not, oh, there we go. No, we don't want that. No, we don't want that. Okay. Can somebody maybe help me bring up another presentation? Oh, there we go. Close that. Wonderful. Go to the list. And let's see. Jewish-Christian relations. Keep going. There you go. No, there you go. Thank you. Okay. That's fine. Okay. We're going to get into some meat and potatoes here. If we can. Let me get the other. We're all familiar with this? Okay. If every Christian on earth practiced this, do you know what a different world we'd be living in right now?
Yes.
Jesus is not going to touch down again on the Mountain of Olives until the Jewish people say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. You know what that means. That means in Hebrew, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So when he drank the wine with his Jewish brothers and sisters, basically what he said to them is, you will not see me again. And so right there's a clue that the Jewish people still have yet to understand. Because when he comes back, the Jews are going to think, oh, this is the first time he said, no. He's been here before We got over 1 billion Christians in the world to prove it, okay? And we got quite a few Messianic Jews, including me, to prove it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here tonight. We wouldn't be talking about this. So, Genesis 12:3, very important. Lest we forget, God chose to reveal himself through the Jews. My people have been called the chosen people. Last time I checked, I believe they're still considered the chosen people.
Yes. Amen.
May it be so.
Yes.
Now, did you all see the movie Fiddler on the Roof?
Yes.
Uh-oh, what happened? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? It disappeared. I think I touched the screen. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Wow, this is sensitive. I think I better stand back a little bit. Okay, Fiddler on the Roof, Tevye. The actor Topol, by the way, just passed away not all that long ago. He was Israeli. But with respect to the chosen people, there was a scene in the movie you may or may not remember where something really rotten happens to him and his family. And he's always having an ongoing dialogue with God, Adonai, Hashem. And he looks up one day and he says, look, I know we're the chosen people, but just once, could you choose somebody else? So, you know, there's blessings and there's curses, and he had a little bit too much of one. So, God established the Sabbath. You know, it's kind of interesting when you think about this. A lot of people just look at the Jewish people as a bunch of people that missed the boat. And what they do, what they practice is completely irrelevant. It's a cult, okay? And it's actually been overshadowed and done away with because we go from the, quote, Old Testament, which ends in Malachi, and then we go to this book of Matthew, which is, by the way, in my opinion, the most messianic of all of the Gospels. Why? Because it begins with entire lineage. So there is your connection between what was and what is and what's going to be. Okay? And if you are ever in a conversation with a Jewish person who is interested and willing to have a discussion about this potentially flashpoint topic, because it can be, that's what I would show them first and foremost, because hopefully if they're teachable, like the other slide said, they will realize the lineage. And to me, there's nothing more impressive or dramatic than connecting the dots, and that connects the dots. So to me, it's the most important of the Gospels. So God established the Sabbath with the Jews. Why? Anyone familiar with the Ten Commandments? What does number 4 say? Okay? That's the seventh day. He established the Sabbath, and it is a forever obligation. Now, Christians worship on Sunday. Jews worship on Saturday. Why? Is one right and the other wrong? No. But they're different. They're different. Saturday is the seventh day. Remember how hard God worked for 6 days and then he needed to take a rest? You know, had to get some Gatorade and take a rest because he was sweating from all the work that he did for 6 days? And then we get into the whole discussion, which if we got into it in detail tonight, we would be here till tomorrow. And by the way, the moment sundown happens on the Jewish calendar, tomorrow begins, but that's a whole nother topic, okay? So you might want to know why, which I'm happy to tell you. Yeah, I'll tell you. In the beginning of the Bible, it says, and there was darkness, and God saw the darkness, and then there was light, and he separated the darkness from the light. And so there was one day, darkness and then light. So that's why all Jewish holidays begin at sundown. So when you look on your calendar and you come up on, let's say, November 21st, pick a date, and there's a holiday, a Jewish holiday, it actually begins sundown November 20th. So now you know why Jews start their holidays on sundown, okay? That's a little side note that I wasn't, but there's so many things to talk about, I don't know where to. So the Sabbath is Saturday, AKA the seventh day. That's important because it's the day after God stopped working for 6 days. Can you imagine there was a 6-day work week back then? You know, if they had unions, wow. Big problem. And not only that, but get a Jew to work on Saturday. Believe you me, in some communities, that's a big problem. In Israel, by the way, we've all heard of, let's see, what is it? Chick-fil-A? Is there a Chick-fil-A here in town? There's one over on Lowman, right? Yeah, okay. Well, when my wife and I used to travel quite a bit, because we used to come to the States 3 or 4 times a year and travel around and speak and what have you, we'd see a Chick-fil-A and we'd stop there, because she likes Chick-fil-A. Not so much anymore, kind of disagrees with her, but it occurred to me, Chick-fil-A is not open on Sunday. The people that own the company are believers. I'm sure they're not Jewish, okay? I'm pretty sure they're Christian. But that company, there's a lot of American restaurant businesses that have come to Israel. Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, McDonald's, okay, Domino's. If you like cardboard with salt on it, go to Domino's. But anyway, Domino's is very popular in Israel. The problem with Chick-fil-A in Israel is they're already closed on Sunday. In Israel, almost all businesses are closed on the 7th day, which is Saturday. So they would miss out on the 2 biggest foot traffic days of the week, Saturday and Sunday. So I dare predict that you'll probably never see Chick-fil-A in Israel, okay? So God established the Sabbath with the Jews on the 7th day. It's a holy day. It begins at sundown Friday night, and it goes for 24 hours until sundown Saturday night. Now, you've got a Jewish synagogue here in town. It's a Reformed synagogue, which is pretty, well, how can I describe Reform? You've got Republicans and you've got Democrats. You've got moderate Democrats, and you've got radical Democrats, like AOC. Would you consider AOC to be pretty radical? That's kind of how Reform Judaism is. It's out there, okay? It's out there. There's a number of different sects of Judaism, and there's a rainbow. But with all due respect, they don't come close to 41,000 Christian denominations, okay? So they're not as confused, okay? They argue a lot. Okay, you know, you've heard the old saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Well, that's kind of how it is, and especially when you're in Israel, okay? You've got 9 million Jews living in Israel and probably 100 million different opinions. They don't talk, they argue.
Right.
How do you get a Jewish person to shut up? You tie their hands behind their back. You know that they're arguing with each other because their hands are flailing all over the place. Okay? So God established the Sabbath on the 7th day. Why is it so important that we worship on Sabbath? Because it's the day God set aside. Now, do we want to go down the road of why Christians worship on Sunday? Sure, we can touch on it, but otherwise we'll go into something that'll last forever. Many people have the opinion that this is the Lord's day, this is when Jesus rose on Sunday. Okay, I understand that, and it makes sense. There is another point of view. Please bear with me while I share you this other point of view. I'm not trying to say that it's right or wrong. I'm just offering an explanation. So please hold your darts, okay? from a halakhic perspective, from a Jewish law, legal perspective, Yeshua, Jesus, actually rose on what is known as Motzei Shabbat. What is Motzei Shabbat? It's when Saturday starts to ebb and Sunday starts to appear, which is at sundown. So when you start counting how many days in the grave, how many days on the cross, this, that, you can get into a lot of minutia when it comes to this. There's a significant number of believers who will tell you, technically it's not Sunday, it's Motzei Shabbat, which is later Saturday night. For what it's worth, it became known as Sunday. I'm not here to dispute it. I'm not here to refute it, okay? I'm just giving you an explanation that this is a point of view which has some merit. Between you and me, you can worship whatever day you want. If you want to come to this church and Pastor Dwayne has the door open on Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock, God bless, come. Okay? Services are scheduled on Sunday and what have you. Many churches have services on Saturday night as well. Okay? But there are different viewpoints, and I'm not here to tell you one is absolutely right and one is absolutely wrong. I'm just letting you know that there are different viewpoints on it, okay? And let's see if we can go to the next one. Well, I already told you that, so you know that commandments were given to the Jews. And when Charlton Heston went up on Mount Sinai, okay, for the first time, okay, he hung out there for a long time. He came back, and what did he see going on? Shenanigans.
Yes.
Big time shenanigans, okay? And a lot of people will tell you that's Aaron's fault, okay? Because he roped them all into doing all this stuff. Well, I don't want to get into that, but point is he went back up again. And he came back. And the law, at least the appetizer to the law, was given to the Jewish people. So let's go to the next one here, and if I can, okay. Biblical feasts. What are the biblical feasts? Does anybody know any names of the biblical feasts?
The biblical feast is showing from the beginning to the end on Yahushua, Jesus. And it starts with the Shabbat, because that, as I say, first holiday is Shabbat. After is coming the Messiah when he went on the cross, and after that is the first fruits. After that is a Pentecost. After that a feast of trumpet. After that Yom Kippur, and finally the Feast of Tabernacle. What is very important in Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is prepared us to go into heaven with Messiah, Yahushua, Jesus, to live forever. And that's why it's very important thing to celebrate.
Come up here. I want you to finish my speech. No. No, you're right. You're right, Hannah. She gave a very long answer. The biblical feasts have multiple names. Some will call them the feasts of the Lord. Some will call them the Jewish holidays. They actually have been given to everyone. They are feasts of the Lord for all people to partake in. Right now, we are at the end of a holiday known as Sukkot, okay? Which many people refer to as the Feast of Tabernacles or Feast of Booths. And you know, when the Jews were out in the desert for 40 years, that's because Moses never asked his wife for directions, okay? So they were wandering around for 40 years, all right? So they followed the Shekinah glory of the Lord, okay? There would be the pillar of fire, okay? So the Jewish people were following. When it stopped, they stopped. They camped. When it lit up, They moved, they followed. So we're coming to the end. In fact, tonight is actually the very last night of what is known as the Feast of Sukkot. And if you came to our place, you would see a sukkah. We have a sukkah set up at our place. What's a sukkah? It's a booth, okay? And we actually sit in it and have our meals. We invite friends to come over, hang out, have a glass of Manischewitz, if you can tolerate Manischewitz, okay? It's not an easy palate, okay, to drink Manischewitz. I'll tolerate it for a blessing, but to drink a glass of Manischewitz, well, I think I'd rather drink castor oil, but never mind. So, so we will take down our sukkah. But this is remembrance. I'll tell you something that you probably have never heard before. Thanksgiving. Do you know who the pilgrims really were in their personal lives? The real story of Thanksgiving, which we're coming up next month. I'll tell you the story about the pilgrims and Thanksgiving. These were very religious people that lived in England. They were persecuted because the people of England, of course, you've got the Church of England. And like many other official state churches, they're not exactly observant when it comes to religion and so on. So these people felt persecuted. They couldn't practice their religious beliefs. They weren't Jewish, okay? So after many years of persecution, they decided they were going to relocate. So they rented a U-Haul boat, and they crossed over the English Channel, and they ended up in Holland. And where they ended up in Holland was right next to a community of very religious Jews. Now, these people are very godly people. They believed in the Bible. And not a casual thing like, oh yeah, my Bible's on the coffee table in the living room. I open it up on Christmas and Easter. No, they believed in the Bible. So they got to know this community of religious Jews, and they started sharing with them about the Torah, about Shabbat or Sabbath, all these Jewish customs, blessing over wine, which originated in Judaism, by the way, blessing over bread, which originated in Judaism, by the way, blessing over food, which tell me to stop and I will. Water immersion also originated in Judaism, okay? You ever heard of the term mikveh?
Yes.
Okay, this is a holy pool of water. So all of these things, the water immersion, blessing over bread, blessing over wine, really began in Judaism. Did they lose their status? No. But I'm at least hopeful that many of you in this room do take these kinds of blessings seriously. Okay? Now, you may not pronounce them in Hebrew. That's fine. God understands every language. So if you say, "Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, has created the fruit of the vine," God understands that. And if you say it in Hebrew, he understands it too, because it's the holy tongue. So these religious people got to know the Jews in Holland, and they saw how devout they were. They saw that they worshiped on Shabbat. They had a Torah. They ate challah. They ate kosher. They did all of these things which adhered to the Bible. Now, you say the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament. How many of us in this room believe that the Old Testament is gone away with, irrelevant, and we don't need to discuss it anymore at all? It's meaningless. If you do, see me afterwards. Or let's have lunch. It'll be a long lunch, okay? They saw how these Jewish people were living their lives and how serious they were. And this had a huge impact on them. When they finally left Holland and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, they kind of looked at that as their Red Sea experience. They saw the king of England as Pharaoh, okay? And they saw these Jewish people as like revelatory people to them, teaching them all this stuff they never heard before. So they sailed across the Atlantic. Do you know Plymouth Rock was originally called Little Israel? Because these people came to love and trust and believe what these religious Jews were sharing with them. It was, you can look it up, it was originally called Little Israel. And I'll tell you something else you might not know. So important was Hebrew and Israel and Judaism to these pilgrims. Do you know that Massachusetts almost adopted Hebrew as the official language of the state? This was actually discussed back in the day in Massachusetts. You can look it up. You don't have to believe me. So now we get back to Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is giving thanks, okay? There's a lot of things we should give thanks for, and we should never stop giving thanks. And they were giving thanks for the bounty, okay? But they didn't necessarily celebrate it the way that most of our elementary school textbooks have told us. To them, Thanksgiving was their celebration of Sukkot, which is giving thanks for all these things, because they were so influenced by this Jewish community in Holland. So they were synonymizing, is that a right word? Synonymizing?
It sounds good.
Sounds good?
It sounds good.
Great. Here's that $5 I promised you. No. Anyway, so yeah, these were very serious people, and they were heavily influenced by these Jews in Holland. So when somebody asks you about Thanksgiving, which is coming up a few weeks from now, you can actually look it up. I don't know what sources you use. I have my own little PowerPoint. If you want to drop me a note, you can go to our website, which I think is pictured here, Bless Israel Network. Yeah, blessisraelnetwork.com. Send us a note, and I'll send you my PowerPoint. But they actually felt that they were celebrating Sukkot. Little known fact. Okay, so let's move on. And let me, okay, and close this. Oh, there we go. Oh, suddenly my website appeared. You're getting sneaky back there. I actually need a Kleenex if there's anyone around. Oh, is there one over here? Yeah, I see it. No problem. I got a big Jewish nose. Okay. Excuse me. So, does that bottom statement make any sense? When you're ministering to a Jew, keep one thing in mind, more than one thing. What you may call the Old Testament is the only Bible that person knows.
Yes.
Okay? It's the only Bible that person... You go to a Jewish synagogue, you're not going to find a New Testament. If you do, please let me know. I'll call the fire department. By the same token, you also may walk into some churches and find only a New Testament. That's a problem. That's a problem. We should know better than that. We really should. So when you're talking to a Jew and you use the term Old Testament, and I'm not condemning or criticizing, because you know what? It's been used so many hundreds of thousands of times, people are used to hearing it. Doesn't mean that it should be used, But what I'm saying is it's been used so many times, people are used to hearing it. But here's the potential problem. If you're ministering to a Jewish person who does not know Yeshua, Jesus, and the only Bible that person knows is what's called the Old Testament, and you use that term, he's thinking to himself, why has that guy just insulted me? Why old? That's my Bible. I'm looking at Psalms. I'm looking at Genesis. I'm looking at Isaiah. I'm looking at Ezekiel. This speaks to me. And it should speak to Christians too.
Amen.
It should speak to Christians too. Let me make what I believe is an obvious statement, but may not be so obvious to you. I hope it is. Judaism would still be Judaism without Christianity. Christianity would not exist without Judaism.
That's right.
Can I get an amen?
Yes.
Where did Jesus, Yeshua, come from? My Jewish brethren still have not figured it out in its true blossomed sense. A growing number of Jews, both in the U.S. and in Israel, have come to the point where they recognize Jesus, Yeshua, is, for lack of better terms, a nice Jewish boy. Okay? Like my mother used to call me because I was her first son. You're a nice Jewish boy. Well, wait till I tell you what I did last night, Mom. So I didn't get home till 2 in the morning. Many, many Jews are recognizing Yeshua as one of their own, including a lot of rabbis. I happen to know several rabbis who are not messianic. One of them, his name is Shlomo Rickstein, and he's the rabbi of a Jewish synagogue in Efrat, which is basically the same as Bethlehem. I mispronounced it. What's the proper pronunciation of Bethlehem? Anybody know? You're looking at me like, where'd this guy just land from? It's Bethlehem. It's actually 2 Hebrew words called Beit Lechem. Beit is house, Lechem is bread. What's Yeshua sometimes known as? The bread of Beit Lechem is the actual appropriate Hebrew pronunciation of Bethlehem. So this rabbi is the chief rabbi of this synagogue in Efrat. He's one of the rabbis who has publicly acknowledged that Jesus was a nice, observant Jewish man. He doesn't accept him as Messiah yet, so we still need to keep praying for the man. But he does recognize his Jewishness. And that is, I think, essential for the Jewish people, whether they're here in Crucis or they're in Jerusalem. They need to understand that, because as long as we have fake news perpetrating, the Jews killed Jesus. No. Remember what he said? I lay down my life.
Yes.
No one forces me to. I lay down my life. So when you come across some zealot that says the Jews killed the Lord, you have an opportunity to quote scripture to them to prove them incorrect. And if there's any way that, in my mind, is the most effective way to disprove something, it's using scripture itself.
Yes.
Use scripture itself. That's your rock. When Yeshua said, I will build my church on this rock, well, that rock, among other things, is scripture. So a growing number of Jews have begun to realize that Jesus, in fact, was Jewish. And that's a hard pill to swallow for many of them, because the overriding stereotypical perception of Christians and Christianity among Jews tighten your seatbelts, is that they are our enemy. Can you imagine? Every one of you in this room is a loving, God-fearing Christian. Almost all of you, loving, God-fearing Christian, quote unquote. And if you actually think that the Jews are the ones who killed him, you need to be re-educated on that topic.
That's right.
Say again?
That's right. Absolutely.
You remember when Pilate held court? And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar, almost every movie that's been made misrepresents that quote-unquote trial. It didn't happen in broad daylight. All the Hollywood films, it's a beautiful sunny day, it's 12 noon, we just finished lunch, so let's get down to executing this guy. No, it didn't happen that way. There was a battle going on between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, okay? The Sadducees were the very, very black and white, hardcore religious. The Pharisees were not so. They believed in life after death. They believed in the gifts of the Spirit. You know, they were very different than the Sadducees. The Sadducees felt extremely threatened by Jesus, even though they knew he was Jewish. That wasn't the point. The point was he was seen as a threat to their authority. So you've heard the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? Well, guess what? The enemy of the Sadducees was Rome. But in this particular case, it turned out to be a relationship of convenience. So they go to Pilate and they say, look, we want to get rid of this guy. And Pilate is like, well, what did he do? I want proof. So he actually had a private meeting with Yeshua after he was basically stolen in the middle of the night, because they knew, they were smart enough to know that if they held this exposure, this trial, if you will, in broad daylight, and the Jews as a whole living in Israel at that time witnessed this, there would be a riot. Why? Because at the time that he was persecuted and executed, there was a very large number of Jews who believed in him. As a matter of fact, and this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, my point is that the version of Messianic Judaism, which is what it was, that was taking place when Yeshua was alive, is what a growing number of believing Jews are practicing today. Now, think about that for a moment. Messianic Jews were not considered poison. Today in Israel, I've lived there for 12 years, Messianic Jews are not liked by the government. But in Yeshua's day, there was no problem with Messianic Jews, because there was a huge number of Jewish people who thought he was Messiah. And they were extremely upset when he was persecuted and executed. And the way things went, when Pilate was overseeing this, the audience, the crowd, was filled with people who came as plants. You know, like a lot of you heard about what went on January 6th, that there were a lot of people there who were planted to make it look like these were radicals, revolutionaries that want to overturn the government. Well, if they really wanted to overturn the government, they found a very lousy way to do it. But you know how many people believe that? So these people were in the crowd, prompted and invited by the Sadducees, because Pilate is going to put the decision to the crowd. And what's he going to do? He gets this really schnooky guy named Barabbas, who's done just about any, you name it, from cutting off the heads of parking meters to cheating on his income tax and all kinds of lousy things. So, you know, Pilate puts him out there. Who do you want? Who do you want? And the crowd is shouting, Barabbas. So by default, Jesus is the guy they take away. Well, does that mean that the Jewish people as a whole wanted to get rid of Jesus, Yeshua? No, it doesn't. It means that this tiny little event was misrepresented to make it appear that the Jewish people as a whole wanted to kill Jesus, when that is not correct. Jews and Messianic Jews worshiped together in the same Jewish synagogues. Does that happen today? What do you think would happen if a bunch of Messianic Jews, myself included, walked into the Reformed synagogue here in town and announced who we were? We'd be shown the door quicker than you can turn a light switch. But in those days, Messianic Jews were completely accepted. So on Shabbat, Saturday, the seventh day, when Yeshua taught, here's a trick question. Almost spilled the beans. How many Christian churches did Jesus teach in?
None.
Why?
There weren't any.
There weren't any.
They were all synagogues.
The only day of worship at the time was Shabbat. The only house of worship was a Jewish synagogue.
That's right.
And the Jews were given special status by Pilate because they were not Roman citizens. So Jewish worship on Shabbat was totally acceptable. And Messianics and normative Jews, I guess you could say, or unenlightened Jews, or whatever you want to call them, they worshiped together. And their teacher on many occasions was none other than Jesus himself. Can you imagine talking to your wife on Saturday morning? You know, it's like 9 o'clock, honey, I think I'm going to go to worship today. Who's teaching? Jesus. Oh, okay, I'm going. You know, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. What's sad is that today in Israel, Messianic Jews are not well thought of. If when we made Aliyah, which is when we immigrated, Aliyah is a term which means go up. So when you live in Israel, and we found this out because we spoke incorrectly on several occasions, we lived in Haifa, which is Israel's main port city. It's a beautiful city, really a lovely city. Jerusalem was south, about a 2-hour drive. But we never said we're going down to Jerusalem. You do not say that. Now, hopefully you can remember some of this because you go to Israel, you go, I remember when that guy said that. Yeah. Hopefully it'll help you. Or you can drop me a note or whatever. Just drop me a note from the website. You never say you're going down to Jerusalem. You always say you're going up. Jerusalem is a holy city, the city on the hill. Okay? So you go to Jerusalem. So Yeshua gets executed, and then of course we get, he rose on the third day and all the stuff we spoke about earlier. But if I would have put on my citizenship application, Jewish believer, I would have got a big red reject. It's a very touchy subject in Israel, and you probably say to yourself, why do the Jews have such an issue with Jesus? He's Jewish. Don't they get that? Well, a growing number of Jewish people do get that. However, y'all heard of a guy named Martin Luther? The great Protestant Reformation? Well, Martin Luther used to be very friendly with the Jews. Let me see if I can find another page here. Where do I go to get the... Okay. Here we go. This is part of what happened which influenced Martin Luther. That's probably a little bit of a glamorized rendition of Jesus, Yeshua. Pretty handsome, rugged-looking guy, too, if you don't mind me saying so. So, how did the guy over here, turn into the guy over here? Some people might say, Hollywood, Hollywood, okay? Yeah, that's probably some truth in that. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. I would challenge anyone to show me an image of Yeshua that looked like the guy on the right. He was a Jew. He was a rabbi. Okay? Why would he be holding a cross? Why would he have a crown on his head? Why would he have a halo? This is a makeover. Now, does it take away from the fact that he is who he is? No. This is a rendition, and we have to keep that in mind. He was Middle Eastern. The poor guy probably looked a lot like me. Dark skin, maybe a big nose, curly hair, could be a bald spot, I don't know. By the way, you know what they say about bald men? It's another rabbi hole. If you go bald from the front, you're sexy. If you go bald from the back, you think a lot. If you go bald from the middle, you just think you're sexy. Okay, his name was Yeshua ben Yosef. Now, this is an important term. We all know who Joseph was and what his brothers did to him. He is a type and shadow of Messiah. He's a type and shadow of Messiah. Some people who are really into the etymology of all this will tell you the first coming was Yeshua ben Yosef. The second coming will be Yeshua ben David, because he's of the line of David. Okay, we all know he was Jewish. There are some who will tell you he went into the grave as a Jew and came out 3 days later as a Christian. He was the first Christian. I've heard it. Trust me. I've heard it. And I've heard it in Israel. Because Israel is the safest place in the Western world where you can say nasty things about Jesus and get away with it. Because they are so misinformed about who Jesus really is, and misinformed about who Messianic Jews really are. When I look at my Jewish, my whole family, my late uncle, my father's brother, they're all passed away now, but my father's brother lived in New Jersey. And in 1948, a Jewish country was born. Not only born, but reborn. Okay? How many have heard it said that Israel is God's timestamp? Yes. Okay? So when my uncle, who was living in New Jersey, now we're talking 3 years post-Holocaust, not a long time. So when he heard there was going to be a Jewish country, he said, "What? A Jewish country? Can't be." Well, it was. It is. It will be. He decided to move to Israel illegally, because at the time the British were still in control and they were putting people that were trying to sneak into the country in prison camps. You ever hear of a movie that was directed by Otto Preminger called Exodus? No? Not exactly a Hollywood blockbuster, I'll admit that, but some pretty good stars. Paul Newman, Eva Marie Saint, Lee J. Cobb, Peter Lawford. This was a fictionalized family, but it was set against the background of current events, the modern founding of Israel. And so he snuck in, my late uncle. Itzhak was his name. I miss him a lot. And he snuck in. And he spent the rest of his life in Israel. He and my aunt bore 3 sons. And now there's Calics all over Israel. Not really, but there's about 20 of us in Israel. So if you go to Israel and you go to the street corner in Tel Aviv and you ask if there's a Calic around, you're not likely to get a positive answer, okay? But there's a bunch of us in Israel. Very proud of him. I only wish he lived long enough to see my wife and I make Aliyah, because we went to Israel a whole bunch of times before we made Aliyah. And he said, Danny, you're never going to, you know. We did. And I'm proud to tell you, I can pull out my wallet and show you my Israeli ID. I'm very proud of that. It's quite something not only to be in Israel, but to be a citizen of Israel. Why? With all of its problems, and there are problems, believe me, with all of its problems, it's really wonderful to know that you are a citizen of the one and only country that is not owned by man. It's owned by God, and God alone. Now, I've just lost my humility by saying I'm proud, but to be a citizen of Israel is, I kind of, pinch myself sometimes. We've lived there for 12 years, and I could tell you stories, good, bad, and what have you. Living in Israel is no cakewalk. It is no cakewalk. You have to be aware every day. You might hear traffic reports, oh, there's a traffic jam from Haifa to Bethlehem. It's not often you hear such news reports like that, but living in Israel, you get a different perspective. Let me give you an example. By the way, I don't know how you guys are feeling about how long we're going to go tonight, but I can be here till 2 in the morning if necessary. We won't. Trust me, we won't. But the pastor, Pastor Dwayne, I got a little bit of a headache, so I'm going to take this little guy here to give me some relief. One of the challenges living in Israel is that by and large, Israel is considered the most hated country in the world. The strongest ally Israel has is the United States of America. And that's even a rocky relationship at times. Just go ask Barack Hussein Obama. We were in Israel during most of his presidency. And believe you me when I tell you, he was as disliked as President Trump was liked in Israel. President Trump was the best United States president in the history of Israel, with one exception. And you may be surprised. And it's not Bill Clinton, even though he was well liked by Israelis, because he's the one that finally pointed to Yasser Arafat and said, yep, you are a terrorist, and I'm exposing you for what you're doing. You're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. I've caught you red-handed. You are no good. But the other president that I'm referring to, any ideas? Reagan? No. He was not that great of a friend of Israel, to be honest with you. No, the other president was Harry Truman. Why? It's a story. Okay? It's a story. You may have never heard this before. November 29th, 1947, the United Nations passed UN Resolution number 181. What was it? It was to approve the existence of the sovereign nation of Israel by partitioning 2 states in what was then a general area known as Palestine. Okay? And I'll share a little bit with you about a gentleman named Chaim Weizmann and how this came to be. He's a very important man in the history of Israel. Chaim Weizmann was a chemist, biologist. He was also a statesman, politician, but he invented acetone, okay, the formula for acetone. Now, during World War I, he was living in Britain at the time. During World War I, the Germans were pounding the Brits. They were losing the war. They needed something to turn the tide. Chaim Weizmann went to the crown and said, I will allow you to use my formula for acetone. Why would this benefit them? Because it allowed them to mass produce munitions and weaponry. So he gifted the formula for acetone to the crown. The crown was then able to use that to begin mass production of munitions and weaponry, which turned the tide and allowed them to defeat the Germans. Wow, was the crown grateful. So what did the crown do? You ever heard of the Balfour Declaration? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. The Balfour Declaration was written in 1917, and I'm going to paraphrase, but this was, in essence, Her Majesty's government looks with favor upon the establishment of a national homeland for the Jewish people. Whoa. This was the beginning of what ended up becoming modern Israel. It happened in 1917. And because of what Chaim Weizmann did, the British government wanted to show their gratitude. So they were in control because in World War I, they defeated the Ottoman Empire, which controlled that whole area. Okay? So they said, we're going to take 43,000 square miles of land over here in the Middle East, and we're going to give it to Jewish people as a homeland. You know, I thought Jesus' coming was a miracle. This is even a bigger miracle. I mean, that they were going to give the Jews all this land. Well, that's what they did. They wrote this document. They set aside 43,000 square miles of land for homeland for the Jewish people. Okay, so what happens next? End of story? Not on your life. 5 years later, 1922, those same Brits who said, thank you very much to the Jews, we're giving you 43,000 square. No, not so fast. We're taking back 75% of what we have given you. That 75% became known as the country of Transjordan, which is today's kingdom, Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. The remaining 25% of that land is what became disputed. So the arguments go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Now here we are, 1949, UN Resolution 181, wanting to partition the remaining 25% into two separate states, one Jewish, one Arab. And the Jews are like, I don't care if you took away 75%. We never had a home of our own, not since the days of King David. We'll take it. We'll take it. The Arabs said, not so fast. So they put it to a vote. The vote ended up being 33 in favor of the partition, 10 against. All 10 were Arab countries. Gee, what a surprise. So now you're moving forward, and it's getting close to the time when Israel is going to officially announce existence, independence, which took place in May of 48. So it becomes a huge issue. Everyone in Harry Truman's cabinet is against it. Okay, the chiefs of staff, military leaders, Secretary of State, Secretary of War, which they had in those days, okay? They're all beating on Truman saying, don't do it. Now, of course, most of the world, looks to the United States and they follow what the United States does, except for certain countries, but most of the Western countries will follow what the U.S. does. At least they used to. So Truman is getting an earful from everybody. And he gets to the point where he says, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm done with this. Up steps a gentleman named Eddie Jacobson. Who's Eddie Jacobson? A boyhood friend of Harry Truman. They were in business together. They served in the army together. They were lifelong friends. Eddie calls Harry and says, Harry, I want to talk with you. You should meet somebody. This issue is too controversial. I want you to meet a guy named Chaim Weizmann. Okay? So Truman reluctantly agrees. They bring Chaim Weizmann to the White House. Harry Jacobson, or Eddie Jacobson, Weizmann and Truman sit down in a closed-door meeting for 2 hours. They come out, and Truman announces to the press, the 2 Jews got me. Now, what is the ultimate redemption going to be when it happens? Changing subject. Jew and Gentile together forming one new man. So here you had an early version of one new man. 2 Jews ganging up on one Gentile, convincing the Gentile to do something good for the Jews. Whoa! How often does that happen? So, Truman emerges and decides he's going to go for it. So the United States voted to accept the existence of the new Jewish state of Israel. Praise God. Praise God. So God used 2 Jews and this Christian to bring about this miracle of the rebirth of God's holy land in the 20th century. Yes. Okay. So we can move on here because we're going to end up running a little bit late, and I don't want to do that. But we all know Jesus taught on Shabbat. It's nothing new. He did not teach against a kosher diet. Okay, some people say he did. Didn't come to start a new religion. Some people think he did. He came as a Torah observant Jew. He didn't do away with it. And I will show you, well, you're probably familiar with, can I just share with you what Matthew 5, 17, 18, and 19 says? You can get out your Bibles if you want, but I will share with you. Do not think I came to abolish the law or the prophets, a.k.a. the Torah. I did not come to abolish, for I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not a single jot or tittle from the Torah will disappear. Not until everything that has to happen has happened. Now, there are multitudes of different translations, NIV, NSASB, King James, New King James. Well, the point is that many times Yeshua spoke in parables. Throw the seeds on the ground. Some stick, some blow away, some take root. That's a parable. In this case, he was not speaking in a parable. When he said, do not think I came to abolish, I did not come to abolish, I came to, some people say complete, some will say fulfill. So right there, a lot of people who say he did away with it will say, right there, he completed it, so we don't have to. Well, guess what? That's not exactly the whole story. Read the next line. I tell you the truth, not a jot or a tittle will disappear from the Torah. Not until everything that has happened, it's supposed to happen, has happened. So what does that say? It says a couple of things. The Torah was with us, is with us, and will be with us. Now, how does that line up with you as a Christian or as a Jew? Therein lies the potential point of discussion. Who was Yeshua, Jesus, speaking to at the time? Was he in a church? Who were his students? Who were his followers? Were they Christians?
Jews.
They were Jews. His, quote, Talmudim, which is the plural word for students. So when he says this to them, He's telling them that the Torah is still with us. He's also implying rather strongly that if you're not Jewish, you don't have the same obligation that the Jews do. What do I mean by that? I, as a Jew, have an obligation to the authority of Torah. Now, do all Jews obey Torah? Not on your life. I lived in Israel for 12 years. Believe me, 80% of the country is secular. Okay? But my point is that if you understand what Messiah was saying when he made that statement, he's saying the Jewish people do need to obey Torah. The Gentiles do not. However, and this is important, they're more than welcome to. They're more than welcome to. Do you know that there are 613 mitzvot, which is a Hebrew word for commandments, 613 commandments in the Jewish Bible? I categorically refuse to use the term Old Testament, okay? Just doesn't sound right to me as a Jew. But do you know that there are more commandments in the New Testament than in the so-called Old Testament? Do you know that most of you who, if you're serious about obeying the Bible, you are probably obeying the vast majority of them and don't even realize it? So when he says, do not think I came to abolish, I did not come to abolish, why would anyone interpret that as meaning the exact opposite? I didn't come to abolish, I came to fulfill. I came to you as God's living embodiment of the Torah on earth. God in the flesh. He had all the attributes of God himself, only he walked among us. Now, when the Jewish people en masse come to understand that, we're going to be living in a whole new era. And it's up to people like you here, when the opportunity presents itself, to speak humbly but truthfully. Because the Jewish people feel that the group of people that have done more damage to them than any other group in the world is who? The Christians. Let me see if I can find some proof to that, if I can find my glasses here. Move on down here. Let me close that. I want to close this and go to the next. Can we go to the next? Yeah, never mind the Last Supper. We all know it was a Passover city. Keep going. Can we go to the next page, if possible? Can we do that? Anybody? Okay. Okay. This is anti-Semitism. There's no other way to call it. Okay? Easter and Passover used to be linked. This was the beginning of the big change, the big separation. They were referred to, my people were referred to as the odious people. Let me go to the next one. This is a long list. You've heard the term Christ killers. Yeah. Constantine was a sun worshiper. Henceforth, Sunday. Official Sabbath was changed. Oh, sorry. Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday, but shall work on that day, but on the Lord's day they shall especially honor, and as being Christians shall, if possible, do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut out from Christ. Come on. There you go. There's a date. The first official replacement theology statement, my friends. We all know about the Crusades. Synagogues, not allowed.
Always thought the Catholics were Nazi, or
Say again?
Germany. I always thought the patches originated in Nazi Germany, but according to
They
that,
brought it back, yeah. Hitler had Jewish blood, by the way.
oh yeah,
Okay, this is the Spanish Inquisition. Now, speaking of the Spanish Inquisition, you guys have what's called Sephardim, Sephardic Jews, okay, in the Southwest. These are people whose roots date back to the Iberian Peninsula, Portugal, Spain, and they were given a choice: accept Jesus or you get the sword. Accept Jesus or get the sword. So a large number of them clandestinely accepted Jesus rather than get executed. Many of them chose to leave. Some of those Jews who left were on the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. What are those? Columbus?
Columbus, yes.
The story in our elementary schools, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Guess what? He was a Jew. That's my ad lib.
I think they left that part out.
I think they did. You're right. Those were Jews on those three ships that their lives were in danger. So they set out for the New World. Good for them. But you've got a large number of Hispanic Jews that were living in Portugal and Spain during that time, and they left. And most of them ended up going to South America and Central America. Some went to Africa, but most went to South and Central America. And over time, they migrated. And many of their ancestors are living right here in Las Cruces, and El Paso, and Dallas, and Phoenix, Colorado, Southern California. And their ancestors date back to the Iberian Peninsula. Now, many of these Jews, when they left and they settled in South America or wherever it was, they didn't want to be known as Jews, so they pretended to be Catholics because they didn't want anybody to find out they were Jewish. So as time went on, okay, some of them gradually began to realize they're Jewish. I have personal friends who live in California, and she is a Sephardim, which is plural for Sephardic. And she was living in Mexico as a child, and she would see her mother put on a scarf over her head and on Friday night light candles. And this puzzled her for years. And once in a while she would see her father go into the bedroom and close the door, and he didn't want to be bothered. And she come to find out that he's got a little black book. Well, guess what the book turned out to be? It turned out to be a Jewish prayer book. So she began to get increasingly suspicious. And finally, one day, as her father was getting very old and frail and not in good health, she came to him. She said, "Papa, I gotta know, are we Jewish?" So he goes into the closet, opens up a chest of drawers, takes out this huge envelope, and presents her with the entire family history that goes back hundreds of years. Yes, they were Jewish. but they were deathly afraid of being exposed. So she wrote a book. It's called On You Seen Awake. Her name is Grace Serrano Fenn. She and her husband run a congregation in the San Francisco area. I'm happy to say, I don't want to say proud, but happy to say they're very, very dear friends of mine. So you have the Spanish Inquisition. They're not getting done expelled yet. Portugal, 1497. Pests. So I'll stop here. And at this point, I've just presented you with factual, historical information why the Jews have a problem with Jesus. Now, I'm not doing this to turn everybody on their heels, but I'm doing this to share with you why the Jewish people have such a problem with Jesus. See, if you're a Gentile and you grow up and you're just, doing the usual stuff, you're a teenager, you're a juvenile delinquent, you're a cheerleader, you're whatever, having fun and so on and so forth, drinking too much, partying, blah, 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 not getting good grades and so on and so forth. And maybe a friend of yours says, hey, you know who Jesus is? And you have a conversation. You take it seriously, and you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Guess what? That's not the end of the project. That is only the first step. So when you're in a church service, and at the end of that service, the pastor says, now with your eyes closed, anyone who wants to accept Jesus, raise their hand. That's wonderful. But then after that comes discipleship. That's only your first step. And that was my very first step. So when you talk about the Jews and Jesus, I say this with love and respect. The Christian community en masse has not represented itself in a way which would convince the average Jew to accept Jesus as Messiah. Does that make sense? Given what you know, does that make sense? Now, you're looking at a guy who is Jewish and a guy who has accepted the Messiah of this same religion. What's the matter with me? What's the matter with the rest of the Messianic Jews out there? They get drunk? No. When I first came to faith, that was my very first step. I got hungry and wanted to know more. I wanted to know more. So I began looking deeper, trying to understand who Yeshua really was, not what the church said he is. Not who the standard Christian line, but I wanted to dig deeper, so I began investigating this. And I came to understand who, I believe anyway, who he really is and what he truly, really stood for. And the inaccuracy of replacement theology. Okay? Am I running too long, Pastor?
We can do some Q&A.
Pardon?
Question and answer.
You let me know.
Yeah, I'll give consent. I'm letting you know.
5 minutes?
Yeah, and then we'll do Q&A.
There's an old song, you may have heard it years ago, called You Talk Too Much, Everybody. I may be talking too much. If you read Romans 9, 10, and 11, who's talking? Not Apostle Paul, a Pharisee named Paul, who admits his Jewish lineage. I love the man. But let's identify him as who he really was. And when he's speaking in Romans 9, 10, and especially 11, he's basically giving a lecture to the Gentiles. Among other things, if you read it, don't be proud. Don't be arrogant, because if you believe that God did this to the Jewish people, which, by the way, he didn't do, he can do it to you too. God's promises are irrevocable. Amen? So the Jews were, are, and will be God's chosen people.